What's poppin' world? Back at it again with another video for y'all. Y'all tapped in with the Head of the Game podcast. Without further ado, the title is red. Let's get straight into it. It's been on my mind for quite a while. And really, I'm just at a point to where I just want to voice my opinions on my biggest problems with police culture, because obviously there's a lot of different sides of it, very controversial, but I feel like with most arguments, those that don't know how to articulate their points, taking both, sides into consideration makes it that much harder to get your point across. So obviously I'm a black man in America. So right out the gate, you might look at me and say, hey, all right, well, obviously there's a bias, there's an indoctrination, there's a cultural programming, if you will, on my stances and my opinions on this specific topic. But I just want to lead a disclaimer before I start getting into my points that, I'm an independent thinker. I think for myself. I'm not a person where I feel like I'm not going to weigh out both sides unless it's brutally, just obvious, right? So I'm not a person that locks into CNN or NBC. I do watch Fox News. I try to have a balance. Whether I agree with you or disagree with you, I feel like, because we all exist with each other inside this country, though I may disagree, the other side has to be considered, because if you're trying to win an argument, you're trying to win over the other person. And there's certain people you can't win over. But that's besides the point. Let me get into the real reason why I'm making this video, right? So when you look at one of my first biggest problems with police culture is internal affairs or investigating internally. Now you're allowing the same entity to pretty much self-correct without no intervention from a independent party, right? So you got that going on. And the biggest problem with that, it just seems like between them, the judicial system as a whole, it's like everything is in cahoots. And when things happen in plain sight, plain video, now, like I said, there's lots of different speculations, there's different point of views and stuff like that. So I don't want to bring up any specific case specifically, but the ones that are just really blatant to see, people will go out their way and only extract certain pinpoints to, support their narrative, right? But if I was to bring up a case or a situation that everybody's familiar with, I would say the George Floyd case, right? In broad daylight, what you saw is what happened. Now you have all these people, talking about all fentanyl and if he didn't live a certain kind of life, he wouldn't have put himself in that predicament, for that to happen. And I just got the axe, right? I just got the axe. When has your priors... Now, I understand in the court of law, your priors, I'm talking about your prior offenses, way out to where it could impact, the sentencing or the judgment or the punishment or whatever comes along with that. But when has that ever been the death penalty, right? Let's just be real. But that's just my point of view on that specific subject, is that the internal affairs, unless it goes to the Supreme Court, where you actually got a jury or, certain judges and stuff like that, that's just a separate entity the whole Eternal Affairs and them not releasing body cam footage and, trying to spin stories and lying on police reports and stuff like that. It's one of my biggest issues with police culture because it's a dirty, filthy game in that regard. I would also say that another thing is that the whole fear for my life standpoint. Now, I understand, just like every other job, this job specifically, everybody wants to come home. Everybody wants to be safe. Everybody wants to take their precautions, procedures, but there should be a protocol where in a split-second moment, there's a judgment call, and you as the professional should be held up to a higher standard. So the police should not be the ones where us as the public have to de-escalate the public servants when they're supposed to be funded by the taxpayer to work for, the public, right? That's what you swore an oath for. So if people are swearing an oath to something they're not living up to, I have a big problem with that, right? I have a big problem with that because, hold on, let me get over here real quick. My bad, y'all. My bad. Just had to get over real quick. But my biggest problem with that is that the fear for my life thing, it shouldn't be a veil. Now, I understand case by case scenario, every situation isn't the same. It requires a judgment call, like I said, at the end of the day. But yet again, it's just like any other occupation, right? If you're a truck driver, you're on the road, you're held to a higher standard than the everyday driver. Why? Because you are a professional. If you're a doctor, or if you're any other person that's to deal with people primarily involved, you're held up to a higher standard, right? That's what a professional is all about. If you're a professional fighter and your hands are registered, you can't just get into a physical altercation with a regular person, because then your hands are going to be in the court of law, held as a weapon. You feel me? Battery charges with a deadly weapon. Why is the police exempt from that, level of standard of, that why are they exempt from that standard when every other occupation is held to the same? If you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you do anything that's a breach of what you agreed upon, then your consequences are going to be way more dire, because if you're a law enforcement, you're supposed to know the law better than the everyday person, right? And I just feel like it's a dirty game in that regard. Another thing about police culture is that, which goes into my next point, is that some of them just don't have no regard for your constitutional rights, right? They really don't. They just say, I'm the law, I'm above the law, when honestly the police should be below the law, because the law's what's backing what the law is supposed to be there for. Meaning that the police officer should come second when it comes down to, just interactions of dealing with any situation, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm not saying is that, all right, just get rid of the police. The police definitely serves a purposeful purpose, right? Like, they're needed. I'm not saying that police don't need to exist. But time and time again, what we see in police culture are these instances where what occupation, you can mess up at your job and then you get a paid vacation. Oh, wait. You mess up at your job and they're investigating it internally, and you get a whatever paid vacation you get. If you're a truck driver and you get into an accident, you don't get a paid vacation until they figure out who was at fault, you're out of work. So, to those that support the police through and through,